Okay, everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to look at the lives of women in revolutionary America. So our objectives and standards are to analyze the lives of women in revolutionary America and to understand the struggles that women faced in revolutionary America. And take a moment there to read the standards if you would, please. So how would you describe the lives of women during revolutionary America? Some vocabulary. We have Declaration of Independence. This is a document that declared the colonies independent of Great Britain. Treaty of Paris ended the Revolutionary War and allowed for the creation of the United States. Constitution, the document that laid out a plan for the government of the United States. Textile factory is a location where many women could work to make fabric and clothing. Regulation paper is a document that was signed by women working in textile factories to obey certain rules. Composition means writing essays, and rhetoric is speaking effectively. So women take an active role. There were many women who took an active role during the American Revolution War. Many participated in activities outside the home, like we talked about earlier this week with supporting soldiers or serving sometimes in battle or as spies and things like that, which helped expand and improve the role and rights of women. Now, others did voice strong opinions, however, about their political rights, such as this woman here, Abigail Adams, who was the wife of John Adams, a key political person, and Mercy Otis Warren, right over here. The Treaty of Paris, which was signed on September 3rd, 1783, ended the war and allowed for the creation of the United States, but now the country is going to face the difficult task of creating a government. So forming a new government. Success in the newly formed United States was not a guarantee. Many people weren't sure what type of government they wanted. Should they have a king? Should they have a president? What type of, legislature should they have? Should the states have more power than the federal government? Should the federal government be in charge? What about the courts? So there are many questions that people in the country had, and many people thought, hey, maybe the United States will not work out as a country. The system of government which would be used in our Constitution would be a combination of English common law and Roman law. Now, many people, including women, were just as concerned about this new government and this new country. During the Revolutionary War, you've probably heard of the Declaration of Independence before, but that did not technically exclude women in it, but it didn't mention their rights either. It just says all men are created equal. Well, that mean all men, didn't mean everybody. And in terms of the founding fathers, some believed it did, others believed it didn't. But because of this, some women, such as Abigail Adams, were supporters of women's rights, and they wrote about it. In many letters to her husband, John Adams, who, like I said earlier, helped with the Declaration of Independence, and he was helped with creating the new government, the Constitutional Convention, she asked that women be included, or women's rights be included in the Constitution. So, new rights for a new country. On September 17, 1787, the Constitution of the United States set up human, social, and political rights. However, not everyone was totally included in these new rights. Again, it did not specifically deny rights to women, but they were excluded in other ways. For example, women were not allowed to own property in this new country, which at this time owning property was a requirement to vote. So therefore, women could not vote in revolutionary America. And they were not, however, they were not the only group that was denied rights under the new government. African Americans and Native Americans also faced discrimination as well. So restricted rights of women. During the late 1700s and early 1800s, women had very few legal rights in the U.S. Most of them lost their legal rights when they married their husbands. For example, if they owned any property or had any money, it would now fall under the control of their husband. They could also not hold political office, they couldn't sit on a jury, and laws made it very difficult for a woman to divorce her husband. If she did divorce her husband, she would have to give up control of her children to her husband, and she would also lose her home. So obviously very different than today, but in the late 1700s and early 1800s, that was the view of the country. Surprisingly, actually, single women had more rights than married women, which you would think married women would have more rights being a mother and a wife. But actually, if women got married, they actually faced fewer rights. Now, despite limited social and political rights, women continued to write and push for equal rights. And there were some men as well. I don't want you to think that all men were against women, but there were some men in the country that believed that women could, play a very important role in the country as well. So working in the Industrial Revolution, many people are going to move to the cities in the late 1700s and early 1800s for jobs in factories or mills during the Industrial Revolution. Something like what you see in the picture there. That's a mill. I don't know what it made, can't tell from the picture, but people would find work in these mills or factories to make materials. And women especially found many new opportunities, but city life and working in factories could be dangerous and dirty. But the creation and arrival of new inventions in the United States allowed and opened many new opportunities for women. Richard Arkwright from Great Britain, this guy right here, had invented a new improved spinning frame that was automatic and run by water. This moved the production of textiles and fabrics and clothing and things like that from the home to these factories. Then Samuel Slater, you can see him here, that's his picture there, began to use water-powered machinery for spinning and carding cotton in Pawtucket, Rhode Island in 1790. You can see this here. This is like his factory here. It's a little hard to tell, but this is actually water that's running down some steps here, and this would be his factory here. Using water-powered machinery to produce cotton yarn would occur for the first time in the U.S. at Slater Mill, and it allowed women an opportunity to work outside of the home. Many women, and men for that matter, sought work outside their homes during the Industrial Revolution. Frances Cabot Lowell set up the first power loom in the U.S. to spin thread and weave cloth in one factory in Waltham, Massachusetts in 1814. You can see in the picture there, here's an example of one of the Lowell mills. It's kind of hard to tell, but here's a woman here working on one of the machines and some other women back here. So again, you can see women working in these factories. Single girls were typically hired to work the machines, and other mills will soon spread across the country and hire young women to work. And many times, this was the first time that women will earn a wage or earn money for themselves. It's the first time many women will actually get away from their homes as well, their parents or whoever. But women will use these wages to support both their families and themselves. But it's dangerous and dirty work. Although factories and mills offered many, including women, the opportunity to work, they were dangerous and dirty places. Frequently, women worked 12.5 to 16-hour days today. Just to compare, most people work about 8 hours, and then they're given a break or a rest or something like that. So that's a long time to not work, or to work, I'm sorry, with very little rest or break period. They were often not paid the same amount as men either. Many lived in boarding houses with 12 other women, and most of their wages or the money they earned would have to go to rent or paying their, for them to live there. Women also had to sign something called a regulation paper, which required them to obey certain rules and restrictions, like they had to, be good-mannered and not use bad language and not, do, dangerous things or, be out late at night or whatever. So, and if they broke this rule, they could be dismissed for bad behavior or even disrespect to their boss. Excuse me. However, women also use these boarding houses for enjoyment, such as playing piano, sewing, or even writing letters home. Now, women and worker rights. Due to low wages and poor working conditions, some women workers took to protest organizing. 102 women, along with men, at the Pawtucket Mills in 1824 participated in the first strike, meaning they walked off the job due to wage cuts and increased working hours. New rules and regulations were actually put in place for the mills in 1828, such as they couldn't talk when they were working, and they had a reduced pay, which caused 800 mill girls to walk off the job. Now they marched around with banners and they set off fireworks. They were threatened with being fired and losing their jobs, and because they were afraid of losing their jobs, they did return back to work. But this does lay the foundation for future protests and future worker rights. So gaining education, the education of women and girls during this time always came after the education of men and boys. Everyone believed that men and boys should be educated. Women should, stay at home, take care of the home, care for the children, cook, whatever. And only a few women and girls, typically those who were wealthy, could read or write. Now, girls who were educated were typically taught at small schools, which were run by women, which were mostly out of those women's homes or other homes, and they were just basically taught women's subjects, though, like subjects that were seen strictly for women, such as music, French, dancing. They weren't really taught math or science or anything like that that you may learn today. Colleges and universities were not open to women as well. But following the Revolutionary War, Judith Sargent Murray, this woman right here, wrote in a column in the Gleaner in Boston that girls should be taught to think. Women should be given the right to education. And eventually, new schools for girls emerged where they were taught not just music and dancing, but they were taught reading, composition, and rhetoric. In September of 1821, the first publicly funded school for girls was founded at Troy Female Seminary by Emma Willard, this woman right here. This is a picture of her when she's a little older, in Troy, New York. So prior to that, typically, like we said, only the wealthy could, afford education. But with this new publicly funded school and other schools for girls, wealthy and middle-class families could afford to send their daughter to schools. Unfortunately, poor women and slave girls did not really have an education, but many hoped that education for women would lead to them earning some equality with men. So what about living in revolutionary America elsewhere? Although many younger and single women went to work in mills or factories, older women typically stayed home, cared for the children, cared for the home, and things like that. And because of this, duties and activities that took place both inside and outside the home became known as the women's sphere, quote unquote, that was her realm. The man's realm was outside in the working world, we're in the battlefield, but the women's sphere, the woman's world was in the home and, kind of taking care of, the property outside the home. But some women did work elsewhere outside the home. Not every woman who worked went to go work in a factory or a mill. Some worked in family stores or family businesses. Others worked as nurses, teachers, or servants. And women were also very active in church or religious organizations as well. All right, so how would you describe the lives of women during revolutionary America? Think about that. That'll hopefully help you answer the question at the end there. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and talk to you soon.